I will
our
say
best
that
foot
the
forward.
only team that's left with diversity is the team that announced that they like this script the most as it is, and that's Leo and Kristen. Everyone else had major problems with it,
but riddle me
and with
that- no.
exactly the things that you're bringing up and exactly the things that we brought up to each other.
Hollywood loves to preach diversity. But the second you create scandals, step out of line, or stop playing their game, you're not talent anymore. You're blacklisted. And somehow, these 15 black actors managed to cross that line so hard, they'll never be cast again. Let's talk about Monique's story on top of it, because she is one of the most brutal Hollywood takedowns you'll ever hear. She wasn't some struggling actress clawing for attention. She was on top of the world. Her performance in Precious was so raw, so unforgettable, that she walked away with an Oscar. That's the kind of role that usually launches an actress into superstardom. But instead of her career skyrocketing, Monique was suddenly treated like she didn't exist. And why? Because she refused to play by Hollywood's dirty little rules. After Precious, she was asked to travel overseas and promote the film for free. No contract, no payment, just do it for us. Monique said no. She stood her ground, and that's when some of the most powerful names in the business, Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, and Lee Daniels, allegedly turned their backs on her. The message was clear. If you don't play along, you don't work in this town. Monique didn't just sit quietly and accept her punishment either. She started calling it what it was: blackballing. She spoke openly about how black women in Hollywood are underpaid and disrespected. And when Netflix offered her a fraction of what they were paying other comedians for a special, she took them to court. That lawsuit shook the system, forcing people to talk about the kind of discrimination Hollywood never likes to admit. But the sad truth is, for years, her Oscar didn't protect her. Speaking up cost her the career that talent alone should have guaranteed. Jaleel White will forever be remembered as Steve Urkel, the suspenders-wearing, squeaky-voiced neighbor who stole the spotlight on Family Matters. When the show first aired in 1989, he wasn't even part of the original cast, but by the early 90s, Urkel had become so wildly popular that the entire series shifted to revolve around him. His catchphrase, "Did I do that?" was repeated in living rooms across America.
Did I do that?
And by 1991, White had turned a simple guest appearance into one of the most recognizable sitcom characters in television history. But that kind of fame comes with a price. When Family Matters ended in 1998 after 9 seasons, Jaleel wasn't just a young actor. He was trapped in a character costume he couldn't take off. Casting directors couldn't see past the oversized glasses and high-pitched voice. Even when he tried to branch out with serious roles, the shadow of Urkel followed. In 1999, he played a college student in the drama Our Friend Martin, and he later appeared in shows like Boston Legal and CSI, but audiences still only wanted the nerdy kid from the Winslow living room. He even had a major voice acting gig. Jaleel White was the first voice of Sonic the Hedgehog in the early 90s animated series Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. That should have opened doors, but even there, he was overshadowed by the Urkel persona. Every press mention tied him back to suspenders and glasses, not his voice talent. After that, Hollywood never really saw Jaleel White. They only saw the meme he created at 12 years old. In the late 1990s, Wesley Snipes wasn't just another actor. He was redefining action cinema. When Blade hit theaters in August 1998, it grossed over $131 million worldwide and proved that superhero films could be both stylish and profitable long before Marvel built its empire. Snipes' performance as the half-vampire, half-human Slayer was so magnetic that it turned Blade into a cult franchise, with sequels in 2002 and 2004. At the peak of his fame, Snipes was one of the coolest action stars alive, holding his own alongside names like Sylvester Stallone and Sean Connery. But by the mid-2000s, the headlines weren't about box office numbers anymore. They were about unpaid taxes. In October 2006, Snipes was indicted on charges of failing to file federal income tax returns from 1999 to 2004, a period when he was earning tens of millions. In 2008, a Florida court convicted him on 3 misdemeanor counts of willful failure to file. And in 2010, he began serving a 3-year sentence at McKean Federal Prison in Pennsylvania. Instead of fighting vampires, Snipes was fighting the IRS, and the image of him in prison blues replaced the long leather trench coat of Blade. Behind the camera, stories of tension on set made his reputation even messier. During the troubled filming of Blade, Trinity in 2004, co-star Patton Oswalt later revealed in interviews that Snipes would spend entire days in his trailer, communicate with the director only through sticky notes signed Blade, and even refused to open his eyes during certain takes, forcing editors to CGI them in post-production. What should have been the crowning chapter of a trilogy instead became a cautionary tale about ego and chaos. In January 2019, Jussie Smollett was everywhere in the news, and not because of the Empire. At the time, he was one of the show's biggest stars, playing Jamal Lyon, a character praised for breaking barriers as a black, openly gay musician on primetime TV. But on January 29, 2019, Smollett called Chicago police, claiming he had been attacked at 2 a.m. while leaving a Subway restaurant. He said 2 men hurled racist and homophobic slurs, poured bleach on him, and tied a rope around his neck. For a brief moment, Smollett was seen as a victim of America's ugliest divisions, but within weeks, the narrative collapsed. By February 20, 2019, Chicago police announced that Smollett had staged the attack. Investigators said he had paid 2 brothers, Ola and Abel Osundairo, $3,500 to fake the assault in order to boost his career and salary negotiations with Empire. The rope, the bleach, the surveillance footage, it all turned into evidence against him. Instead of sympathy, Smollett became the punchline of late-night television and the subject of public outrage. In December 2021, after a lengthy legal battle, Smollett was convicted on 5 felony counts of disorderly conduct for filing false police reports. By the end of Empire's 5th season, in 2019, his character was written off entirely. Despite once being a breakout star, Hollywood studios now saw him as a liability, and no network has risked putting his name at the top of a cast list since. Isaiah Washington had one of the most coveted roles on television in the mid-2000s. As Dr. Preston Burke on Grey's Anatomy, he wasn't just part of the cast, he was one of the show's anchors, appearing in over 60 episodes between 2005 and 2007. Fans loved the tension between his character and Sandra Oh's Christina Yang, and Washington himself was finally getting the recognition he'd worked toward for years. But in October 2006, everything unraveled after a heated on-set confrontation with Patrick Dempsey. During the argument, Washington directed a homophobic slur at co-star T.R. Knight, who at that point had not publicly come out as gay. The incident rippled through the cast, and ABC quickly found itself at the center of a PR nightmare. Instead of de-escalating, Washington made it worse. At the 2007 Golden Globe Awards, while standing in front of reporters with the entire cast, he repeated the same slur again while trying to deny he had used it. That moment, broadcast widely, cemented his downfall. The apology that followed wasn't enough to repair the damage. By June 2007, ABC officially announced that Washington's contract would not be renewed for the 4th season. He went from starring in one of the biggest medical dramas in the world to being abruptly cut out of the storyline. The collapse didn't stop at Grey's Anatomy. Washington's publicist and agent both severed ties with him shortly after, leaving him without representation at a time when his career should have been peaking. Tyrese Gibson should have been untouchable. By the mid-2000s, he had built a rare double career, platinum-selling R&B artist and blockbuster actor. He joined the Fast and Furious franchise in 2003 with 2 Fast to Furious as Roman Pierce, and by the time Furious 7 dropped in 2015, grossing over $1.5 billion worldwide, he was part of one of the most successful movie series in history. But instead of headlines about box office numbers, Tyrese's name became tied to viral meltdowns and public feuds. The moment that defined it came in November 2010 during a bitter custody battle for his daughter, Shayla. In a Facebook Live video that spread across every platform, Tyrese broke down, sobbing, shouting, "What more do you want from me?" The clip was instantly turned into a meme, stripped of its personal context, and played for laughs across the internet. Instead of sympathy, he became a punchline, and Hollywood took notice. Around the same time, Tyrese picked a fight with one of the most bankable stars on the planet, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. When Johnson signed on for his Fast and Furious spin-off Hobbs & Shaw in 2019, Tyrese blasted him on Instagram, accusing him of breaking up the family dynamic of the franchise. The feud dragged on for months, painting Tyrese as unstable and difficult to work with. Studios don't gamble on actors who start public wars with billion-dollar co-stars. By the time Fast X premiered in 2023, Tyrese was still there in the cast, but his off-screen reputation had eclipsed his on-screen work. In the 1990s, Tisha Campbell was television royalty. As Gina Waters on Martin from 1992 to 1997, she became part of one of the decade's most iconic sitcoms, trading punchlines and chemistry with Martin Lawrence week after week. When that show ended, she jumped straight into another hit, My Wife and Kids, which ran for 5 seasons from 2001 to 2005. For more than a decade, Campbell wasn't just acting in sitcoms, she was defining them. But after My Wife and Kids wrapped, the spotlight began to dim. The big leading roles that once came easily never showed up again. Instead, Campbell was pushed into smaller supporting parts, recurring roles in shows like Everybody Hates Chris in 2007, Dr. Ken in 2015, and later Empire in 2018. She kept working, but none of those projects gave her the same level of visibility or cultural impact as the ones that made her a household name. A huge part of that shift had little to do with talent. Hollywood's long-standing ageism, especially toward black women, made it harder for Campbell to find roles that matched her skills and legacy. By the time she was in her 40s, the offers had already slowed. Even in recent years, she has stayed active with projects like Uncoupled in 2022 and Act Your Age in 2023, proving she can still deliver comedy with the same energy she had in the 90s. But Hollywood hasn't given her the same platform it once did. In 1997, Cuba Gooding Jr. stood on the Academy Awards stage, clutching an Oscar for Jerry Maguire, shouting, "Show me the money," in one of the most unforgettable acceptance speeches of the decade. At just 29 years old, he seemed destined for the same level of stardom as Denzel Washington or Morgan Freeman. But instead of building on that momentum, his career choices stalled him. By the early 2000s, films like Boat Trip in 2002 and Snow Dogs in 2002 earned him more ridicule than acclaim, and his credibility as a serious actor started to fade. Then came the scandals that finished the job. In June 2019, a 29-year-old woman accused Gooding of groping her at a bar in Manhattan. That single accusation quickly snowballed into more than 20 women coming forward with similar allegations spanning years. By August 2012, he faced multiple charges of sexual misconduct in New York, turning him from Oscar winner to tabloid headline. Gooding was arrested and appeared in court several times, and in April 2022, he pled guilty to 1 count of forcible touching. As part of the deal, he avoided jail time, but was required to undergo 6 months of counseling and comply with the court's conditions. The civil suits didn't stop there. In August 2020, one woman filed a $6 million lawsuit accusing him of rape, a case that dragged his name through the headlines again before eventually being settled quietly. Even though many of the criminal charges were reduced or dropped, the damage to his reputation was irreversible. Hollywood no longer saw Gooding as a charismatic leading man. he was now branded as a liability. By the time he resurfaced in smaller projects in 2024, the glory days of his Oscar win felt like a lifetime ago. Orlando Brown should have had the kind of career that stretched far beyond the Disney Channel. As Eddie Thomas on That's So Raven, which premiered in 2003, he was the perfect comic partner to Raven Simonet. His energy, timing, and charm made him one of the most beloved teen actors of that era. When the series wrapped in 2007, Brown seemed poised to transition into bigger projects, with fans expecting him to ride that wave into film and adult television roles. But instead of a breakthrough, the headlines turned darker with every passing year. In 2007, just months after the show ended, Brown was arrested for marijuana possession. That was the start of a downward spiral that became impossible to ignore. By 2011, he faced a DUI charge in Los Angeles. In 2012, another arrest followed for failing to show up in court. Over the years, his record grew longer. Burglary, domestic battery, and drug-related charges stacked up to the point where his mugshots became more recognizable than his performances. Hollywood doesn't hand out leading roles to actors who can't be trusted to show up on set, and Brown's reputation for instability overshadowed his natural talent. In interviews, he admitted to struggling with addiction to meth and other substances, and in 2018, he appeared on Dr. Phil in a widely circulated interview that showed just how far he had fallen from his Disney days. There were attempts at comebacks. He appeared in smaller independent projects and music ventures, but they never stuck. Even after publicly announcing in 2020 that he had found sobriety and was working on turning his life around, the stigma of years of chaos still lingered. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Taye Diggs was everywhere. He wasn't just acting in romantic comedies, he was a romantic comedy. In 1998, he starred opposite Angela Bassett in How Stella Got Her Groove Back, a film that pulled in more than $39 million at the box office and cemented him as Hollywood's new leading man. A few years later, he was front and center in Brown Sugar, 2002, alongside Sanaa Lathan, one of the most celebrated black love stories of the era. Diggs had the looks, the charm, and the acting chops, making him the go-to face for a generation of rom-coms that blended black culture with mainstream appeal. But the genre that built his career started to vanish. By the mid-2000s, big studio romantic comedies were drying up, and when they did get made, Hollywood rarely put black men at the center of them. Diggs's career didn't implode with scandal. It hit a wall because the industry stopped making the very movies he excelled at. Instead of leading man roles, he found himself taking smaller parts in films or pivoting to television. On TV, Diggs proved he could still carry a story. He joined private practice in 2007, stayed for 6 seasons, and later landed a major role on the CW's All-American starting in 2018, where he played Coach Billy Baker until 23. At the same time, he leaned into theater, returning to Broadway stages where he had started his career in the 1990s, including starring in Hedwig and The Angry Inch, and most recently, Moulin Rouge, the musical in 2025. Taye Diggs didn't lose his talent or his audience. Hollywood simply closed the door on the genre that made him a star. Gary Dourdan was once one of the most recognizable faces on television. As Warwick Brown on CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, he starred from the pilot episode in 2000 and remained a central character until his dramatic exit in 2008. At its peak, CSI was pulling in over 20 million viewers per episode, and Dourdan wasn't just part of the cast. He was a fan favorite, winning an NAACP Image Award for his performance. For nearly a decade, he looked like the definition of a TV success story. But off-screen, his life was spiraling. Just weeks after his contract ended with CSI, in April 2008, Dourdan was arrested in Palm Springs when police found him in possession of cocaine, ecstasy, and heroin. The charges for heroin and cocaine were later dropped, but the ecstasy possession stuck, and he was ordered to enter a drug treatment program. Instead of the press celebrating his career, headlines were now dominated by mugshots and arrest records. The problems didn't stop there. In 2011, Dordan was arrested again after a violent altercation with his girlfriend, during which prosecutors said he broke her nose. He was charged with felony battery and later sentenced to 5 years of probation. By this point, his reputation in Hollywood was toxic, and casting directors were no longer calling. Financial troubles quickly followed. In 2012, Dordan filed for bankruptcy, declaring he had assets of just $904,000 against debts of more than $1.7 million. The documents revealed he was behind on mortgage payments and couldn't keep up with the lifestyle that came with years of network TV paychecks. Since then, his career has been reduced to independent films and minor television appearances. In the mid-1990s, Stacey Dash was the definition of cool. Her role as Dionne Davenport in Clueless, 1995, made her a pop culture icon, stylish, sharp-tongued, and unforgettable. That film turned her into a household name, and she carried the momentum into TV with the Clueless spin-off series, which ran until 1999. For a while, Dash seemed poised to enjoy the same kind of long-term career as her co-stars, but by the 2010s, she had traded red carpets for news desks, and that pivot is what torched her career. In 2014, Stacey Dash joined Fox News as a political commentator. Overnight, she went from actress to conservative pundit, delivering hot takes that drew outrage across the cultural spectrum. In 2015, she went on air to say that Black History Month should not exist, arguing that it was a form of segregation. She also criticized President Barack Obama repeatedly and went after Beyoncé's 2016 Super Bowl performance, calling it anti-police. These weren't just unpopular opinions. They alienated the very communities that had once celebrated her as a star. The controversies escalated in December 2015, when Fox News suspended her for 2 weeks after she cursed on live television while criticizing Obama's handling of terrorism. By 2017, her contract was not renewed, effectively ending her run as a commentator. The damage, however, had already been done. She had positioned herself as the conservative black actress, a role that made her toxic in Hollywood and too controversial even for conservative media to keep. In 2021, Dash publicly apologized, saying her Fox persona was an act and that she regretted the things she had said. But the apology landed years too late. By then, directors, producers, and fans had already written her off. In the 1990s, Larenz Tate was in a role that most actors could only dream of. He broke out in Menace II Society in 1993, playing O-Dog, a character so raw and magnetic that it immediately put him on Hollywood's radar. Just 2 years later, he starred in Dead Presidents, 1995, a Vietnam-era crime drama that showcased his ability to carry a heavy, complex role. By 1997, he had cemented himself as a romantic lead with Love Jones, opposite Nia Long, a film that became a cult classic and remains one of the most beloved black love stories ever made. Tate had all the makings of a mainstream leading man, but he refused to play by Hollywood's usual script. While many black actors were being pushed into one-dimensional stereotypes, the criminal, the sidekick, the comic relief, Tate consistently chose roles that had depth and meaning. He wasn't interested in being boxed in, and he made that clear in interviews throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. But Hollywood isn't kind to actors who turn down the easy roles. Instead of rewarding his integrity, the industry quietly sidelined him. By the mid-2000s, the big film offers had slowed. Instead, Tate turned his focus to television. In 2017, he joined the cast of Power as Councilman Rashad Tate, a character so popular he was spun off into Power Book 2, Ghost. While the role has kept him visible and connected to audiences, it's a far cry from the leading man movie stardom that seemed inevitable after Love Jones. Larenz Tate never lost his talent or his fan base. He lost the Hollywood machine behind him by refusing to play the lazy caricatures that so many others were forced into. He carved out a path on his own terms. But it also cost him the kind of movie star status his early career clearly promised. For nearly a decade, Anthony Anderson was one of television's most familiar faces. From 2014 to 2022, he starred as Andre Dre Johnson on ABC's Blackish, a role that earned him 11 Primetime Emmy nominations and turned him into a household name. The show's mix of comedy and social commentary made it a cultural touchstone, and Anderson, already known for films like Barbershop, 2002, and Hustle and Flow, 2005, became the kind of actor audiences expected to see leading network sitcoms and hosting major events. But in 2018, his trajectory shifted. That summer, the Los Angeles Police Department confirmed Anderson was under investigation after a woman accused him of assault. Though prosecutors declined to file charges due to lack of evidence, the headlines alone were enough to cast a shadow over his career. In an industry obsessed with image, the suspicion was as damaging as a conviction. Anderson never stopped working, but the nature of his roles changed. By 2021, he was back on Law & Order for its 21st season revival, reprising his role as Detective Kevin Bernard, but only for one season. In 2022, Blackish aired its series finale, and Anderson's days as the face of a primetime comedy ended. Since then, his presence has shifted more toward hosting gigs. He co-hosted the 75th Primetime Emmy Awards in 2024, and he fronts the Fox game show We Are Family alongside his mother. The transition from leading man to host wasn't about lack of talent. Anderson remains a gifted comedian and actor. But in Hollywood, where perception is everything, the 2018 case lingers in the background. Even without a conviction, that moment created a barrier he hasn't fully broken through, leaving his career in a space where visibility remains high, but opportunities for commanding roles have noticeably narrowed. Marcus T. Paulk was just 11 years old when he landed the role of Miles Mitchell on Moesha, which premiered in 1996. Playing Brandy's cheeky little brother, he quickly became one of the most recognizable child actors on UPN, appearing in all 6 seasons until the show ended in 2001. For kids growing up in the late 90s, Paulk was part of the TV family, funny, charming, and memorable in a way that suggested he had a big future ahead once he grew out of the child star phase. But that's exactly where things got stuck. After Moesha, Paulk struggled to break free from the shadow of his childhood role. Hollywood didn't hand him the kind of transitional opportunities that other young actors sometimes get. Instead, he bounced between minor appearances, films like Roll Bounce, 2005, and Red Tails, 2012, or small TV guest spots. He even lent his voice to Disney's The Proud Family for several episodes, but those were supporting parts, never the leading roles that would have redefined his career as an adult. By the mid-2010s, Paulk was trying to expand beyond acting. He pursued a music career and got involved in managing talent, even running a small modeling agency. But none of those ventures ever pushed him back into the mainstream. Adding to the challenge, personal issues occasionally made headlines, including a 2013 arrest for domestic violence, which didn't help his already fragile reputation in the industry. Even with those setbacks, Paulk never completely disappeared. He continues to pop up in smaller projects and behind-the-scenes work, proving he hasn't lost his drive. But Hollywood's main stage, the one he seemed destined for as a child, has never really opened its doors for him again.